It all started as a stupid dare. My friends and I had been drinking in the woods near the edge of town when someone brought up the old cemetery on Miller's Hill. It wasn't even a real cemetery, just a cluster of crumbling stones overrun with weeds. Legend had it that one of the graves belonged to a man who was executed for witchcraft in the late 1700s. Supposedly, anyone who disturbed his grave would be cursed. I didn't believe in that kind of thing, so when they dared me to go up there alone, I didn't hesitate. I was the skeptic in the group, the one who rolled my eyes at ghost stories and urban legends. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed the hill, the wind whispering through the trees like an audience waiting for a show. The cemetery was smaller than I expected, just a dozen or so headstones leaning at odd angles. Most were too weathered to read. I wandered through the graves, feeling the soft crunch of leaves under my boots. That's when I saw it, a sunken patch of earth marked by a crooked, unmarked stone. It felt wrong, not just eerie, but heavy, like the air itself was thicker around that spot. I'm not sure what possessed me to do it, but I stepped onto the grave. Maybe it was the beer. Maybe I wanted to prove how fearless I was. I stood there for a moment, expecting nothing to happen, and nothing did. At least, not right away. By the time I got back to the group, I was laughing about how lame the whole thing was. We moved on to other topics, drank a little more, and eventually went home. I didn't think about the cemetery again until that night. It was subtle at first. I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I thought I saw something move in the corner of my room. Just a flicker, like a shadow shifting where it shouldn't. I looked up, but nothing was there. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe I was just tired. But over the next few nights it kept happening. Small movements in the corner of my vision, always just out of reach. Then came the noises, faint, almost imperceptible. The creak of a floorboard, the rustle of fabric. I lived alone, so it wasn't like I could blame it on a roommate. I checked the locks, walked through the apartment with a knife in hand, but everything was normal, except for the feeling, the sensation that I wasn't alone, that someone or something was watching me. The first time I saw it clearly was about a week after the cemetery. I just turned off the lights to go to bed when I noticed a figure standing in the corner of my room. It wasn't a person, not exactly. It was tall, unnaturally so, with a body that seemed to absorb the light around it. No features, just a solid black silhouette. But the eyes, those were the worst part. Two glowing red orbs that burned into me like coals. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. For what felt like hours, we just stared at each other. Then it moved. Not toward me, but closer to the door, as if it were leaving. And just like that, it was gone. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I tried to convince myself it had been a dream. Maybe sleep paralysis. I'd read about that online. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The sightings became more frequent. The shadow would appear in the hallway, the bathroom mirror, even standing outside my apartment building. It never did anything, just watched. But its presence was enough to drive me to the edge. I needed to know what I was dealing with. I started researching the cemetery, combing through local archives and old newspaper clippings. That's when I found the story of Elias Harper, the man accused of witchcraft. According to the records, Harper was a recluse who lived on the outskirts of town. He was blamed for a string of tragedies, crop failures, livestock deaths, even a mysterious illness that swept through the village. The townspeople dragged him to the center of town and hanged him, burying him in what would later become Miller's Hill Cemetery. The rumors said Harper cursed anyone who disturbed his grave, vowing to follow them until they fulfilled their debt. What the debt was, no one seemed to know. I contacted a local paranormal investigator named Laura, someone who specialized in cases like this. She came to my apartment armed with cameras, EMF detectors, and other equipment I didn't recognize. The moment she stepped inside, she froze. There's something here. Something old. Laura set up her equipment, asking me to recount everything that had happened. As I spoke, the atmosphere in the room grew heavier, like the air itself was pressing down on us. The EMF detector spiked repeatedly, the needle jumping into the red zone. One of her cameras caught strange orbs of light floating near the ceiling. But it wasn't until she played back the audio recording that things took a darker turn. In the silence between my words, we heard a voice. It was faint, almost a whisper, but unmistakable. "Leave." Laura's face went pale. "It doesn't want you here," she said, "but it's not going to let you go either." She suggested a cleansing ritual, something to sever the connection between me and the entity. But as we prepared, the lights flickered, and a low growl echoed through the apartment. The shadow appeared again, more solid than ever. It loomed over Laura, its red eyes burning brighter than before. She shouted something in Latin, throwing a handful of salt at it, and for a moment it seemed to waver. Then it vanished. The cleansing seemed to work, at least for a while. The apartment felt lighter, the oppressive atmosphere gone. I started to sleep through the night again, and for the first time in weeks I thought I might be free. But last night, I saw it again. Not in my apartment this time, but reflected in the window of a passing car as I walked home. Just a glimpse, but enough to send a chill down my spine. I don't know what it wants, or why it's still here. Laura won't return my calls, and I can't afford to move. If you're reading this, please take my advice. Never disturb what you don't understand. Some things are better left buried.
Please subscribe for more stories.